Cisgender men have been able to become pregnant for the past 50 years. Nobody knows how or why this started, and the subject is still extremely taboo. Kentaro works as a marketing executive for a company called Univ in Tokyo. He's a very successful man who is well liked by his coworkers and popular with women. He sees a different girl almost every night, but he keeps returning to Aki, a freelance writer. Because neither of them is looking for a relationship because they are focused on their careers. This casual arrangement works perfectly. One afternoon, Kentaro's boss Osugi invites him, Tanabe, and another coworker to dinner to discuss the future of their project, but the third coworker has to leave early due to child duty at home. Tanabe remarks after he leaves that men should not be in charge of childcare because that is what women do. Following that, Kentaro takes the train to see Aki and notices a man give up his seat to a woman with a baby on board tag on her bag. After he and Aki have a fling. Aki returns to writing while Kentaro watches TV and hears about the latest cases of male pregnancy. Kentaro comments the idea creeps him out, and Aki admits she isn't against the idea of having children, but they would get in the way of her work. Kentaro suddenly starts feeling a bit unwell and decides to take a nap. The next day, during the presentation, Kentaro proposes the next ad campaign to be about diversity, showing different types of bodies in their models. The idea is well received, and sometime later, Kentaro is selected Creative of the Year at the company, an achievement he celebrates together with his birthday. His co-workers bring him a beautiful cake, and when Kentaro is about to blow out the candles, he remembers how his birthdays used to be when he was a kid. His mother could only afford one slice of cake. She also had to leave after he blew out the candle because she had to keep working since Kentaro's dad was dead. Back to the party. Once the cake has been cut, Aki decides to leave, because she doesn't feel like she fits here and prefers to go home to continue working. After she's gone, Kentaro notices he's feeling a bit dizzy again but ignores it. At the end of the night, Kentaro's mother Tomoko calls him after she's done with her taxi driver shift to wish him a happy birthday. Kentaro wishes her mother would stop working because she's old and he could just send her money now, but Tomoko doesn't want to be a burden. The next day at work, Kentaro feels dizzy again and rushes out of the office to puke in the toilet. He then goes to the hospital for a checkup and is surprised to learn that he is pregnant. Instead of following the doctor's advice, Kentaro flees in denial. Later, he buys a pregnancy test while ignoring the stares of some street girls. He rushes home to take the test, which confirms his suspicions. At that moment, Kentaro receives a call from Osugi, who wishes to ensure his well-being because no one else could possibly replace him at work. Kentaro goes to the office without telling anyone about his pregnancy. While discussing the possible social issues they can use for the ad campaign, they watch a clip of how mothers in Japan have to cover themselves when they're feeding their babies. Suddenly 2 wet spots appear on Kentaro's shirt, and when his co-workers notice, he runs to the bathroom to take care of it. It turns out he's already lactating, and when he googles what's going on, he learns about the letdown reflex, which can be triggered by the sound of a baby crying. Meanwhile, Aki is attending a special event where she bumps into an old friend that has brought her new baby with her. Aki is shocked by this because this friend used to say she didn't want children. But she explains that when she turned 40 she realized it would be her last chance and she had to take the plunge. Sometime later, Kentaro goes to see the doctor to ask to terminate the pregnancy. The doctor hands him the authorization forms he needs to fill, which also need a signature from the other parent. Kentaro admits he doesn't know who the mother is, and when the doctor explains he's 10 weeks pregnant, Kentaro checks his calendar and confirms the mother is Aki. He sends her a message asking her to meet tonight to talk. But she turns him down because she needs to work. Kentaro tries to concentrate on other things, like googling some information about lactation and morning sickness, which frustrates him because all the websites are designed for women. Osugi interrupts him and invites him to go to the sauna with him. Osugi expresses concern for Kentaro's health because he keeps falling behind at work, and he should take better care of himself if he doesn't want to lose his job. In the evening, Kentaro shows up at Aki's and tells her about the pregnancy, as well as his desire to terminate it. After the initial shock, Aki agrees to sign the form, but Kentaro becomes ill again and vomits all over the paperwork. The next day, Aki tells her best friend the news, asking her to keep it a secret. Only her body going through it, convincing her to sign. When Kentaro returns to work, he discovers his team finished a meeting without him. To make matters worse, Osugi announces the leadership position has been given to Tanabe, because Kentaro isn't reliable any longer. Kentaro tries his best to adapt to the pregnant life while waiting for the day of the procedure and starts to wear lactation pads. On the train, he gives his seat to a pregnant woman, since he's still keeping his own state a secret. At the office, they make him do menial work. When the doctor calls Kentaro to tell him they finally have an open spot for his termination, he goes to the hospital to start the paperwork. A nurse explains to him that because it's been 12 weeks, this will be treated as a stillbirth, so Kentaro will have to report it to the city office and get permission for the fetus burial. Hearing the word burial and being handed a picture of the ultrasound makes Kentaro have doubts. While waiting outside, he's approached by Miyagi, who is also pregnant, and invites him to have dinner with him. The two men bond over the everyday complications of being pregnant, but eventually Kentaro confesses he's not keeping the baby. Miyagi understands and explains he used to think he wouldn't keep it either, but then he realized it's for the best because his wife couldn't get pregnant again after she had their first kid. After dinner, Kentaro walks Miyagi to his house and meets his son and his wife Noriko, who is glad to see her husband happy again because after he first learned about the pregnancy, he had been pretty upset. During the next meeting with their clients, Tanabe makes a presentation that they find boring, and they ask Kentaro for his opinion. Kentaro tells the clients that they should use a pregnant man for the campaign because it's never been done before, thinking about everything he's been through and Aki's words about having an advantage at work. The clients think it's unrealistic and that no one will do it, but Kentaro volunteers and shows his ultrasound picture as proof, convincing everyone that the idea is fantastic. Over dinner, Kentaro informs Aki that he will keep the baby but that she is not required to assist. Aki tells him she'd love to help him raise the baby because she's been thinking lately that it's the right time, but their relationship will remain the same. She also Googles all the foods Kentaro should avoid during pregnancy to charge their order accordingly. Afterward, Kentaro calls Miyagi to share the news, and they agree to meet for drinks soon. Then, Kentaro calls his mother, who is very worried about Kentaro possibly ruining his career. Kentaro explains he's already made up his mind and Tomoko hangs up to try to process this information, thinking his son may end up with the same life she had. A few days later, Kentaro attends a photoshoot to take pictures for the ad campaign, which turns out to be a total success. Soon everyone is talking about it on social media and TV, finally bringing attention to the matter of male pregnancy. Kentaro is even invited to a few shows. One evening, he goes to a bar with his co-workers and feels out of place because he is the only one that can't drink. He also bumps into one of his many casual night girls, who tells him they can't see each other anymore because she can't stand the idea of her man being a mother. The next day, Kentaro visits Miyagi and shares his troubles. He realizes his co-workers were never really his friends, and Miyagi is the only man he can talk to openly. Miyagi admits it's the same for him, and the two of them come up with an idea to create an online space just for pregnant men to share their troubles and tips with each other. Meanwhile, Aki gets a call from her sister asking her to confirm if she's going to the wedding or not, but Aki is still unsure because she doesn't get along with her dad. When Tomoko finally sees the ads on TV, she goes to see Kentaro to ask why he didn't use a pseudonym to avoid bothering the family, but Kentaro points out it's just him and her. He also uses the chance to ask about his late father, but Tomoko dodges the question. Sometime later, Kentaro and Miyagi release their new online platform for pregnant men, which is such a success that Kentaro appears on TV to talk about it. The next time Kentaro goes to the doctor, he brings Aki with him. And they learn the baby is a boy. The doctor also explains men have more muscle mass, so he'll start to feel the baby moving later than a woman would. One afternoon, Kentaro and Miyagi notice one of the men on their platform asking if they could meet up for support, and they organize the first meeting of pregnant men in a nice bar, which is a total success. Afterward, Kentaro goes to Miyagi's home and sees his efforts are truly helping, because Miyagi's kids saw Kentaro on TV, he doesn't think his dad is weird for being pregnant anymore. In that moment, Kentaro finally feels the baby move for the first time. Sometime later, Aki and Kentaro go to a temple to ask for a birthing blessing, but the monk keeps assuming Aki is the pregnant one. Afterward, Kentaro asks Aki if they really aren't getting married, and Aki says she isn't interested, pointing out Kentaro shouldn't be worrying about gender roles just because the monk said some weird things considering his life can't be called traditional anymore. Their conversation is suddenly interrupted by a call from Noriko, who informs them Miyagi is in the hospital. When they arrive there, Noriko explains an infection caused the contractions to start early, and because the baby was only 20 weeks old, it didn't survive. Suddenly Noriko starts crying as she admits she feels guilty for feeling sad but also kinda relieved that Miyagi lost the baby because their son was made fun of at school for having a weird dad, and she was given cold looks by the neighbors as well. Later after they leave, Aki wonders if they aren't bringing a baby to a life of mockery too. So Kentaro replies parents are there to protect their kids, like his mother did for him. Some things can't be handled through cold logic, and if this is how Aki thinks, Kentaro isn't sure they can raise a baby together after all. Aki can't stop thinking about this issue, and when the day of her sister's wedding finally comes, she arrives late. Her father begins scolding her as soon as he sees her for not settling down yet, calling her a selfish brat and an embarrassment. Back in the city, Kentaro suddenly starts feeling some pain. He goes to see the doctor, who informs him they may expect a premature birth and therefore surgery. Afterward at the office, Kentor's called the company's main ambassador, and his co-workers inform him they've already made plans for new campaigns involving the baby when he's finally born. Kentaro can't believe they're deciding his life without asking him first, thus he runs out of the office to find something sweet to eat before announcing he's quitting. The company's desperate to keep its star, so they call the CEO to make him talk to Kentaro and offer lots of praise, pointing out how they can't be successful without him. Kentaro's feeling sensitive and begins crying as he accepts to stay. After the wedding, Aki stays at her parents' home and has to deal with her dad's scolding again. Her mother even points out how she gave up her own ambitions to raise Aki, so Aki snaps and reminds her that women don't need to be like that anymore. In the evening, she goes to a bar to meet with old, high school friends, and most of them already have families of her own. Aki overhears people at the other table laughing at Kentaro's ads and calling pregnant men mutants, so she cuts in and explains that because of comments like these pregnant men must hide. When Aki returns home, her father gets ready to scold her again, so she comes forward and finally tells her parents she's having a baby with a pregnant man that she won't marry. As expected, her parents hate the idea, but she promises she'll stay in Tokyo and keep working there with her baby, thus she won't be a disgrace to the family. Then Aki decides to go home, and while she's at the train station, she calls Kentaro to tell him that she wants to raise their baby right without any of the old prejudice. Meaning the two of them could create their own new method to do things that fit the kind of relationship they have. Once Aki arrives in Tokyo, Kentaro picks her up at the station and accepts to raise the baby together because what Aki said on the phone reminded him of his own mother, who also had her own method to do things. The cab they took drops Kentaro at his place first, and he's shocked to see a man waiting for him there. His name is Eiichi, and he claims to be Kentaro's father, but also his mother. Kentaro calls his mom to ask for clarification, and a furious Noriko shows up to hit Eiichi for coming back. She explains to Kentaro that Eiichi had abandoned them when he was a baby, and she lied to her son to save him from the pain. For now, Kentaro will let him stay in his apartment, and while Eiichi is having a bath, he finds a picture of his own birth among the man's clothes. While Noriko drives Aki home and Aki confesses she admires her for raising Kentaro alone, Eiichi tries to bond with Kentaro, explaining how much things have changed for their kind since he used to have to hide and that he wants to help Kentaro with his community project. A few days later, Kentaro comes home from another doctor's appointment to find Eiichi and Aki arguing because Eiichi has been treating her like a servant. Eiichi immediately jumps on his son to show him his ideas for maternity products for men, which Kentaro likes, but Aki stomps out of the apartment when they ask her to join the team so she can have a more stable job. Kentaro goes after her, explaining he just wants to help his dad with his dream, but Aki leaves him behind when she realizes Kentaro's going to ask Eiichi to help him raise the baby because Aki's always busy. Sometime later, Kentaro meets with Noriko and asks for the full story. Back then, pregnant men were heavily discriminated against, and Eiichi ended up quitting his job to gamble. Noriko's father tried to give him a position in his inn, but when the neighbors learned about his pregnancy, they started treating him differently. Eiichi couldn't take it anymore and ran away, and since then Noriko only saw him again once when he tried to ask her for money. She thinks making business with him is an awful idea, but Kentaro doesn't think he's so bad because he kept a picture of the family. The next time Kentaro goes to a community meeting, he finds Eiichi got there first and is charming everyone with stories and his ideas for new products, making Kentaro suddenly feel left out. Meanwhile, Aki is having dinner with his friend Takagi, who has an offer for her. They need an editor for a very important project in Singapore. Aki loves the idea, but it would mean going away for 2 years, so she says she'll think about it. When she calls Kentaro to tell him about the offer, he asks her to say no, because he has his own projects too and they need to share the baby time, causing Aki to hang up. The following morning, Kentaro wakes up to see he's all over the news for fraud because Eiichi has run away with the money. His friends from the pregnant community demand an explanation, and the press is all over the office and his apartment building, so Kentaro has to stay home. Luckily, Miyagi calls him to check on him and brings him over some supplies, confessing that even if Eiichi's a bad guy, he gives him hope because it means a baby that came from a man can be as great as Kentaro. Noriko comes to offer her support as well, saying Eiichi is probably gambling away the money. This gives Kentaro an idea of where to find him. While Noriko and Aki bond over their experiences with pregnant men and feeling left out, Kentaro finds his father living in a van in a parking lot with other guys like him. Eiichi gives his son the money back and explains he suffered a lot back then, so running away it's all he knows how to do. But he wants his son to live his own life, therefore he quits their project and wishes him the best. The next day, Aki tells Kentaro that she'll accept the job in Singapore, and promises to come over a lot to help with the baby. Kentaro is hurt by this, but pretends it's fine. At work, the clients are considering dropping Kentaro from their campaign, so they decide to offer a press conference to clarify things. Kentaro apologizes for everything that happened and shares the whole story about his dad to prove he had nothing to do with it. When a journalist makes a bigoted comment about the proper duties of a father, Kentaro snaps and goes on a rant on how damaging gender roles are, explaining this kind of bad treatment is what made his father what he is now. Then he tries to leave, only to suddenly pass out on the floor. Aki's been watching the conference at the airport, and as soon as she sees Kentaro is unwell, she decides not to travel and rushes to the hospital. Noriko also goes looking for Eiichi to convince him to come, and together they enter the hospital while ignoring the press. The procedure is incredibly hard on Kentaro, but fortunately both he and the premature baby come out okay. When the family finally reunites, Eiichi almost cries when he takes a picture of his son and grandson that matches his own. From then on, Kentaro and Aki move in together, and Aki manages to get Takagi to make the company in Singapore save the position for her for a few months. The two of them continue to work as usual, taking turns taking the baby with them and asking co-workers for help when needed. Noriko also offers to babysit one night, so Kentaro and Aki can finally relax on a night out. Kentaro's story continues to be talked about, and plenty of pregnant men appear on the news, grateful for the growing acceptance. Now girls even give pregnant men the seats on the train. When the time comes for Aki to reconfirm her position in Singapore, Kentaro tells her that she should go without guilt because he wants her to have the career that his mother could not. When Aki finally leaves, she keeps her promise and returns frequently, not to mention the daily video calls with her son. Kentaro is proud of what they've accomplished, and he's confident that their child will grow up to be a wonderful person as part of his modern-day family.